When you stop reacting, you start winning the power of ignoring people. Full audiobook. Before we begin, I want you to think about the last person who made you angry. The person who disrespected you, the person who ignored you, the person who made you feel small. Now answer this honestly. How much time have you spent thinking about them? Hours, days, maybe even years. Because while you were replaying the argument in your mind, your goals were waiting, your future was waiting, your success was waiting. And that is why most people never become who they're capable of becoming, not because they're weak, not because they're untalented, but because they give their attention to people who have done nothing to earn it. Listen carefully. The people destroying your peace are not your biggest problem. Your reaction to them is. The moment you stop reacting, the moment you stop explaining, the moment you stop needing everyone to understand you, you become dangerous, you become focused, you become free, and that is when winning begins. Chapter 1. Stop giving people free rent in your head. Let me ask you a question. Who is living in your mind right now? Think about it. Who is the first person that comes to mind when you feel frustrated? Who is the person you keep replaying conversations with? Who is the person you wish had treated you differently? Who is the person you wish would finally understand you? Now, here is the uncomfortable truth. That person is occupying space in your mind. And they aren't paying rent. They aren't contributing to your future. They aren't helping you grow. Yet somehow, they are consuming your attention. And attention is the most valuable resource you have. Not money, not talent, not connections. Attention. Because wherever your attention goes, your life follows. That is the key. Most people think they are suffering because of what someone did. They're not. They're suffering because they keep reliving it, again and again and again. The event happened once, but they replay it 1,000 times. Think about that. A criticism lasts 10 seconds. The memory lasts 10 years. The resentment lasts decades. The problem isn't always what happened. The problem is that you keep carrying it. You have a choice. You can continue carrying people in your mind, or you can finally put the weight down. Most people never do. That is why they stay stuck. Because every day they wake up and immediately begin thinking about the people who hurt them, the people who rejected them, the people who doubted them, the people who betrayed them. And every time they do that, they hand over more power. Not to the event, to the memory. That is the key. Your life is being shaped by what repeatedly occupies your attention. Imagine two people. The first person wakes up and spends an hour thinking about an argument from 3 years ago. The second person wakes up and spends an hour learning a new skill. One grows, one stays stuck. The difference isn't intelligence. The difference isn't talent. The difference isn't talent. It is not about ability, it is about discipline. Remember that. It is not about ability, it is about discipline. The disciplined protects their attention. The undisciplined person gives it away freely. Every notification, every criticism, every opinion, every piece of drama. Their mind becomes crowded. Their energy becomes scattered. Their future becomes delayed. And then they wonder why they feel exhausted. Because attention creates energy. When your attention is divided, your power is divided. That is why some people seem calm while others constantly feel overwhelmed. The calm person isn't necessarily stronger. They're simply more selective. They understand something important. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every memory deserves revisiting. Not every person deserves space in your mind. You have a choice. You can keep revisiting old wounds, or you can start building a new future. But you cannot do both. The mind doesn't work that way. Every minute spent feeding resentment is a minute not spent feeding growth. Every minute spent replaying old conversations is a minute not spent creating new opportunities. That is the key. You don't get your time back. Most people are waiting for closure. They think closure will set them free. But closure isn't what sets people free. Decision sets people free. You decide to stop carrying it. You decide to stop revisiting it. You decide to stop giving it attention. That is where freedom begins. Not when they apologize. Not when they change. Not when they finally understand. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their apology. You need your attention back. That is what you've been missing. Your attention. Think about how many hours you've lost. How many days, how many weeks, how many years. All because someone occupied space in your mind. Someone who wasn't thinking about you nearly as much as you were thinking about them. That is a painful realization, but it is also a powerful one. Because if attention created the problem, attention can solve it. You simply redirect it, not once, not twice, repeatedly, every day. Every moment. When the old memory appears, redirect. When the old anger appears, redirect. When the old resentment appears, redirect again, and again, and again. This is not about perfection. It is about discipline. That is the key. The goal isn't to never think about the past. The goal is to stop living there. The goal is to stop giving people free rent in your head. The goal is to reclaim ownership of your attention, because your attention belongs to your future, not your past. Your attention belongs to your goals, not your grudges. Your attention belongs to your growth, not your distractions. The people who win in life understand this. They don't allow everyone access to their mind. They don't hand out attention carelessly. They protect it. They guard it. They invest it wisely. Because they know attention becomes action. Action becomes results. Results become life. And life is too valuable to waste on people who no longer deserve space in your head. Remember that. Your attention is your power. Guard it, protect it, direct it, because the moment you stop giving people free rent in your head, you begin taking your life back. And once you take your attention back, winning becomes possible. You reclaimed your attention. Now, let's talk about the hidden price people pay when they react to everything. Chapter 2. Every reaction makes you weaker. Most people believe strength is about fighting back. It is not. Most people believe power is about having the perfect response. It is not. Most people believe winning means proving someone wrong. It doesn't. Real strength begins when you stop reacting to everything. Think about it. How many times have you lost an entire day because of a single comment? One insult, one disrespectful message, one negative opinion. The event lasted seconds, but the reaction lasted hours, sometimes days, sometimes years. That is the trap. The event is rarely what hurts you most. The reaction does. That is the key. A reaction is not free. Every reaction costs something: energy, focus, time, confidence. And the more reactions you have, the more expensive your life becomes. You have a choice. You can spend your energy reacting, or you can spend it building. But you cannot do both at the same level. Every reaction takes something from you. Imagine carrying a bucket of water. Every time you react emotionally, a small hole appears. A little more energy leaks out, a little more focus disappears, a little more power drains away. Most people don't realize this because the loss happens slowly, day after day, week after week, year after year, until one day they feel exhausted, burned out, frustrated, and they don't know why. The answer is simple. They've been reacting to everything, every opinion, every criticism, every disagreement, every inconvenience, every piece of drama. They've been giving away their energy one reaction at a time. That is the key. The strongest people are not always the smartest. They're not always the most talented. They're not always the most successful. They're simply better at protecting their energy. And because they protect their energy, they protect their future. Look at high performers, successful entrepreneurs, elite athletes, military leaders, top performers in any field. Do you think they react to every distraction? Number they can't afford to. Their goals are too important. Their mission is too important. Their future is too important. They understand something most people never learn. Attention is limited. Energy is limited. Time is limited. Every unnecessary reaction steals from something important. That is why discipline matters. It is not about emotion. It is about discipline. Remember that it is not about emotion. It is about discipline. Strong people feel emotions too. They feel anger. They feel disappointment. They feel frustration. They feel betrayal. The difference is not what they feel. The difference is what they do next. That is where power lies. Not in the feeling, in the response. Anyon can react. Anyon can lose control. Anyon can become emotional. But not everyone can remain calm. Not everyone can pause. Not everyone can think before acting. That is a skill, and like every skill, it can be trained. Have a choice. When something upsets you, you can react immediately, or you can pause. That pause changes everything. Because reactions are automatic, responses are intentional. Reactions come from emotion. Responses come from discipline. That is the key. The goal of this audiobook is not to make you emotionless. The goal is to make you disciplined. There is a big difference. Some people here don't react and think it means becoming cold. Control is power. Control is freedom. Control is strength. Without control, anyone can manipulate you. Think about that. If someone can make you angry whenever they want, who has the power? If someone can ruin your mood with a single sentence, who has the power? If someone can distract you from your goals with a single opinion, who has the power? Not you. That is why emotional control is not optional. It is necessary. Every reaction gives other people access to your life. Every reaction gives other people influence over your decisions. Every reaction hands over a piece of your power, and most people do it without even realizing it. That is the tragedy. They think they're standing up for themselves. They think they're protecting their reputation, but often they're simply giving away control. You don't need to attend every argument you are invited to. You don't need to respond to every criticism. You don't need to defend yourself against every accusation. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You need discipline. That is the key. Discipline is what allows you to stay focused when others want to distract you. Discipline is what allows you to stay calm when others want a reaction. Discipline is what allows you to continue moving forward while others remain trapped in drama. And make no mistake, some people want a reaction. They feed on it. They expect it. They depend on it. Because reactions give them attention, and attention gives them power. The moment you stop reacting, their power disappears. The moment you stop reacting, your power returns. That is why silence can be so effective. Not because silence is magic, because silence breaks the cycle of anger, the cycle of drama, the cycle of emotional exhaustion. And once the cycle breaks, growth begins. You have a choice. Continue reacting and remain stuck, or become disciplined and move forward. One path feels satisfying in the moment. The other creates success in the future. Most people choose the first. Winners choose the second. That is the difference. Every reaction asks a question. Will you give away your power? Every time, you must answer. And your answer shapes your future. Remember this. Every reaction has a cost. Every reaction drains energy. Every reaction delays progress. The people who win are not the people who react the fastest. They are the people who stay focused the longest. Protect your energy. Protect your attention. Protect your peace. Because every unnecessary reaction makes you weaker, and every disciplined response makes you stronger. You stopped giving people free rent in your head. Now, it is time to stop explaining yourself to people who were never trying to understand you. Chapter 3. Stop explaining yourself to everyone. One of the most exhausting habits in the world is constantly explaining yourself. Explaining why you made a decision. Explaining why you changed. Explaining why you said no. Explaining why you are pursuing a different path. Explaining why you refuse to live the way other people expect you to live. And the strange part is this. Most of those explanations change nothing. The people who support you don't need them. The people who oppose you won't accept them. Yet millions of people spend years of their lives trying to justify themselves to everyone around them. That is the trap. They think explanation creates understanding. Sometimes it does, but often it doesn't. Because not everyone is trying to understand you. Some people are trying to judge you. Some people are trying to control you. Some people are trying to keep you exactly where you are. That is the key. You must learn the difference between someone seeking understanding and someone seeking control. Because if you don't, you'll spend your entire life explaining yourself to people who already made up their minds. Think about your own life. How many times have you explained yourself repeatedly, only to discover that the other person wasn't listening? They weren't trying to understand. They were waiting for their turn to speak. They were waiting for another opportunity to criticize. They were waiting for another chance to tell you why you are wrong. And that is why the conversation never ends. You explain. They question. You explain. They question again. You defend yourself. They attack again. Round and round it goes. Like a hamster wheel. A lot of movement. No progress. That is the key. Not every conversation deserves your energy. Not every opinion deserves your defense. Not every critic deserves your explanation. You have a choice. You can spend your life defending who you are, or you can spend your life becoming who you want to be. Most people choose defense. Winners choose growth. Remember that. The need to constantly explain yourself comes from a deeper fear. The fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being judged, the fear of being rejected. And those fears are normal. Everyone experiences them. But the problem begins when those fears start controlling your behavior, when you start changing your decisions to make others comfortable, when you start abandoning your goals to avoid criticism, when you start shrinking yourself so other people can feel comfortable around you. That is where real damage begins, because little by little you stop living your life and start living for approval. That is not freedom. That is dependence. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their understanding. You need clarity. That is the key. Clarity allows you to move forward even when people disagree with you. Clarity allows you to stay committed even when people doubt you. Clarity allows you to remain confident even when people misunderstand you. Because confident people don't require universal agreement. They don't need everyone to approve. They don't need everyone to understand. They know where they're going. And that is enough. Think about the most successful people in history. Do you believe everyone understood them? Many were criticized. Many were doubted. Many were rejected, but they kept moving because they understood something powerful. Results speak louder than explanations. Always you can spend 10 years explaining your vision, or you can spend 10 years building it. One creates arguments. The other creates results. And results have a strange way of ending debates. That is the key. When people see success, many of the questions disappear. Not because they suddenly became wiser, because reality became impossible to ignore. Your responsibility is not to convince everyone. Your responsibility is to stay focused, stay disciplined, stay committed. That is it. Many listeners need to hear this. You are allowed to change without explaining. You are allowed to say no without explaining. You are allowed to leave environments that no longer serve you without explaining. You are allowed to protect your peace without explaining. You are allowed to pursue a different future without explaining. The moment you realize that, something changes inside you. You stop performing, you stop defending, you stop seeking permission, and you start living. That is freedom. Now, let's be clear. This doesn't mean becoming rude. It doesn't mean becoming arrogant. It doesn't mean refusing communication. Healthy communication matters. Honest communication matters. But endless justification is not communication. It is insecurity. There is a difference. A confident person explains once. An insecure person explains forever. That is the key. One seeks understanding. The other seeks validation, and validation is a trap. Because no matter how much validation you receive, it is never enough. Someone will always disagree. Someone will always criticize. Someone will always misunderstand. Someone will always have an opinion. That is life. The goal is not to eliminate criticism. The goal is to stop being controlled by it. You have a choice. Every day, every conversation, every every disagreement. You can either defend your identity or strengthen it. You can either explain your future or build it. You can either seek approval or seek progress. One path leads to exhaustion. The other leads to growth. Choose wisely. Because your energy is limited, your attention is limited, and spending those precious resources trying to convince everyone is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make. Remember this: the people who truly matter will understand eventually. The people who never intended to understand won't. No amount of explaining will change that. That is why your focus must remain on action, not arguments, not approval, results, not explanations. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You need discipline. And discipline means continuing forward even when others don't understand the journey. Stop explaining. Start building. Stop defending. Start growing. Stop seeking approval. Start seeking progress, because the strongest people are not the ones who can explain themselves to everyone. They are the ones who remain committed to their path regardless of who understands it. You have stopped giving people free rent in your head. You have learned that every reaction has a cost. Now, it is time to confront one of the biggest traps of all: the addiction to approval. Chapter 4. The addiction to validation. There is an addiction that destroys more dreams than failure ever could. An addiction so common that most people don't even realize they have it. The addiction to validation. The addiction to being liked. The addiction to being liked. The addiction to being approved of. The addiction to hearing someone say, "You are doing the right thing. You are good enough. I believe in you." Now don't misunderstand. Encouragement is valuable. Support is valuable. Healthy relationships matter. But when your confidence depends on external approval, you become fragile, very fragile. Because the moment approval disappears, so does your confidence. That is the problem. Most people don't trust themselves. They trust opinions. They trust applause. They trust approval. They trust approval. They trust validation. And because of that, their emotional state constantly changes. One compliment makes them feel powerful. One criticism makes them feel worthless. One positive comment lifts them up. One negative comment destroys their mood. That is not confidence. That is dependence. That is the key. True confidence is not built on praise. True confidence is built on self-trust. Think about how many decisions you've delayed because you were waiting for approval. How many goals you've abandoned because someone doubted you. How many opportunities you've missed because someone didn't support your vision. Be honest. Most people are not living their lives. They're conducting a survey. They ask everyone what they should do. Everyone's approval matters. Everyone's approval matters, except their own, and that is why they stay stuck. You have a choice. You can keep asking the world for permission, or you can start giving permission to yourself. That is the key. The most successful people in the world are not necessarily the most talented. They're often the people who stopped waiting for approval. They made a decision. They committed. They moved forward, even when people doubted them, even when people laughed, even when people didn't understand. Because they understood something powerful. Nobody can give you the confidence you are unwilling to build yourself. Remember that. Nobody can give you the confidence you are unwilling to build yourself. Confidence is earned, not received, built, not borrowed, developed, not gifted. And that process begins the moment you stop chasing validation. Let's talk about social media for a moment. Millions of people wake up every day and immediately check who liked their post, who viewed their story, who commented, who approved. Think about what that means. Their emotional state depends on the reactions of strangers. One day they feel important. The next day they feel invisible, not because they changed, because the validation changed. That is a dangerous way to live, because external validation is unpredictable. It comes. It goes. It is here today, gone tomorrow. And if your confidence depends on something unstable, your confidence will always be unstable too. That is the key. You need something stronger, something permanent, something that doesn't disappear when opinions change. That something is self-respect. Self-respect grows when you keep promises to yourself. Self-respect grows when you do difficult things consistently. Self-respect grows when you stay committed after motivation disappears. That is why discipline matters. It is not about motivation. It is about discipline. It is not about applause. It is about discipline. It is not about recognition. It is about discipline, because discipline creates self-respect, and self-respect creates confidence. Most people try to reverse the process. They want confidence first, then action. But that is not how life works. Action comes first. Confidence follows. The person who goes to the gym consistently becomes confident. The person who develops skills becomes confident. The person who keeps showing up becomes confident, not because someone approved, because they earned it. That is the key. Validation is rented. Confidence is owned. Read that again. Validation is rented. Confidence is owned. One depends on other people. Which one sounds stronger? Which one sounds more reliable? Which one sounds more freeing? The answer is obvious. Yet most people continue chasing validation. Why? Because validation feels good for a moment. The problem is that temporary pleasure often creates long-term weakness. Every time you depend on approval, you strengthen the habit. Every time you seek permission, you strengthen the habit. Every time you need someone else to tell you you are enough, you strengthen the habit. And habits become identities. Eventually you stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What will people think?" That is a dangerous question, because if you build your life around that question, you'll never be free. You'll dress for approval, speak for approval, work for approval, live for approval. And one day you'll realize something painful. You've built a life that impresses other people but doesn't satisfy you. That is the tragedy. You sacrificed authenticity for acceptance, and acceptance is never guaranteed. That is why you must stop negotiating your future with people who aren't living your life. You have a choice. You can continue seeking validation, or you can start building self-respect. You can continue chasing approval, or you can start chasing growth. You can continue asking permission, or you can start making decisions. One path creates dependence. The other creates freedom. Choose wisely, because your future depends on it. Here is something most people need to hear. Not everyone will approve of you. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will like you. And that is okay. In fact, that is normal. The goal is not universal approval. The goal is personal integrity. The goal is becoming the type of person who can look in the mirror and respect what they see. That is the key. When you respect yourself, external validation becomes a bonus, not a necessity. You enjoy praise. You appreciate support, but you don't require it. You welcome encouragement, but you keep moving even when it is absent. That is real confidence. That is real freedom. It is real power. Remember this. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You need discipline. You need self-respect. You need the courage to trust yourself. Because the moment you stop needing approval from everyone, you become impossible to control. And when you become impossible to control, you become impossible to control. You become dangerous to mediocrity. You stop living for applause. You start living for purpose. You stop chasing validation. You start building a life worth validating. You have learned how approval creates dependence. Now it is time to master one of the most misunderstood forms of power, the discipline of saying less. Chapter 5. Silence is a power. Most people never master. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. Very uncomfortable. The moment a conversation becomes quiet, they rush to fill the space. The moment someone criticizes them, they rush to defend themselves. The moment someone misunderstands them, the moment someone attacks them, they rush to react. And that is exactly why silence has become a rare form of power, because most people cannot do it. They lack the discipline, they lack the patience, they lack the control. That is the key. Anyone can become emotional, anyone can raise their voice, but not everyone can remain calm. Not everyone can sit comfortably in silence. Not everyone can resist the urge to defend themselves. That requires discipline, and discipline creates power. You have a choice. When someone provokes you, you can react, or you can remain silent. When someone insults you, you can argue, or you can remain silent. When someone doubts you, you can explain, or you can remain silent. One option gives away energy. The other preserves it. That is the key. Most people mistake silence for weakness because they don't understand it. They think silence means fear. They think silence means surrender. They think silence means you have nothing to say. Sometimes that is true, but often silence means something completely different. It means you are in control. It means you refuse to participate in unnecessary drama. It means you understand that not every battle deserves your attention. Strong people understand this. Weak people don't. Weak people feel the need to respond to everything, every comment, every opinion, every criticism, every insult, every disagreement. Their emotional buttons are exposed. Anyone can press them. Anyone can control them. Anyone can steal their peace. That is not power. That is vulnerability. Real power is the ability to remain unaffected. Real power is the ability to stay focused. Real power is the ability to choose your response. Remember that. Choose your response. Because reactions are automatic, responses are intentional, and silence is often the most intentional response available. Look at successful leaders. The most respected people in the room are rarely the loudest. They're often the calmest. They speak less. They observe more. They listen carefully. And because they listen carefully, their words carry more weight. That is another secret of silence. Silence increases value. When you speak constantly, people stop listening. When every opinion is shared, every opinion becomes less important. When every criticism receives a response, every criticism gains importance. Silence changes that. Silence creates mystery. Silence creates authority. Silence creates presence. That is the key. The less you need to speak, the more powerful your words become. Think about a person who talks endlessly. Constant explanations, constant reactions. Eventually people tune them out. Now think about a person who speaks carefully, only when necessary. Only when it matters, people listen. Because silence creates significance. This lesson becomes even more important when dealing with difficult people. Manipulative people. Manipulative people often want one thing, a reaction. That is all, a reaction. Your anger, your frustration, your attention, your emotional energy, because reactions give them influence. That is why some people keep provoking. They know if they can control your emotions, they can control your focus. And if they can control your focus, they can control part of your life. That is the key. The moment you stop reacting, the game changes. The moment you stop reacting, their strategy stops working. The moment you stop reacting, your power returns. You have a choice. Feed the drama, or starve it. Feed the conflict, or starve it. Feed the negativity, or starve it. Silence is often how you starve it. Now, let's be clear. Silence does not mean avoiding every difficult conversation. Silence does not mean becoming passive. Silence does not mean allowing people to abuse you. There are times to speak. There are times to speak. There are times to set boundaries. There are times to stand firm. But even then, silence remains valuable, because silence teaches patience, and patience prevents mistakes. How many problems have been created because someone spoke too quickly? How many relationships have been damaged? How many opportunities have been lost? How many regrets have been created? All because someone reacted in the heat of the moment. A few seconds of silence could have changed everything. That is the key. Silence creates space, space to reflect, space to choose wisely. Most people never give themselves that space. They react instantly, then spend years dealing with consequences. The disciplined person does the opposite. They pause, they think, they choose, and because they choose carefully, they suffer less. It is not about intelligence. It is about discipline. Remember that it is not about intelligence. It is about discipline. The ability to remain silent when emotions are demanding a reaction is one of the highest forms of self-control. And self-control is freedom. Because when you control yourself, other people cannot control you. When you control yourself, criticism loses power. When you control yourself, distractions lose power. That is why silence is so valuable. Not because it changes other people, because it changes you, it strengthens you, it centers you, it protects you. Every unnecessary argument avoided, every unnecessary reaction prevented, every unnecessary explanation withheld. That is energy saved, that is focus preserved, that is power protected. And over time, those small victories create a completely different life. A calmer life, a stronger life, a more focused life, a more successful life. Remember this, silence is not weakness. Silence is discipline. Silence is strength, and the people who master silence become very difficult to manipulate, very difficult to distract, very difficult to defeat. You no longer need everyone's approval. Now you must learn another powerful skill. The ability to let people underestimate you while you continue building your future. Chapter 6. Let them doubt you. One of the most expensive habits in life is trying to prove yourself to everyone. Trying to prove you are smart enough. Trying to prove you are successful enough. Trying to prove you are worthy enough. Trying to prove that they were wrong about you. Trying to prove that you can do it. Trying to prove that you matter. And the strange thing is this. The people you are trying to impress often don't care nearly as much as you think they do. Yet countless people spend years chasing validation through achievement, not because they love the goal, because they want approval. That is the trap. They aren't building a future, they're performing for an audience. And the moment your life becomes a performance, you stop living authentically. You start making decisions based on appearances. You start making decisions based on opinions. You start making decisions based on what others will think. That is the key. The need to prove yourself is often just another form of validation addiction. It wears a different mask, but it is the same problem. Think about the people who doubted you, the people who laughed at your goals, the people who underestimated you, the people who told you it wouldn't work. Now be honest. How much energy have you spent trying to prove them wrong? How much time? How much focus? How much emotional energy? That is energy that could have been invested into growth. Instead, it was invested into proving a point, and proving a point rarely changes your life. Building something valuable does. You have a choice. You can spend your life proving, or you can spend your life building. Most people choose proving. Winners choose building. That is the difference. The strongest people understand a powerful truth. Not everyone needs to believe in you. Not everyone needs to support you. Not everyone needs to understand your vision. And not everyone needs to see your potential. Because their belief does not determine your future. Your actions do. Too many people are waiting for confidence from others. They're waiting for encouragement. They're waiting for recognition. They're waiting for validation. They're waiting for someone to finally say, "I knew you could do it." But why? Why hand that power to someone else? You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their belief. You need discipline. Discipline keeps moving when nobody is watching. Discipline keeps building when nobody is clapping. Discipline keeps growing when nobody believes. That is real power. Because anyone can work hard when they're receiving praise. Anyone can stay motivated when they're receiving encouragement. Anyone can feel confident when they're receiving support. But what happens when none of those things exist? What happens when nobody notices? What happens when nobody understands? What happens when nobody believes? That is where your character is revealed. That is where your future is decided. Because success is often built in silence, long before anyone sees it, long before anyone respects it, long before anyone celebrates it. The world usually notices the result. It rarely notices the process. Think about an iceberg. People only see the top, the visible part, the impressive part. What they don't see is everything underneath: the years of work, the sacrifices, the failures, the discipline, the consistency, the lonely days, the boring days, the difficult days. That is where success is built. Not in public, in private. That is why letting people underestimate you can be a gift. A gift because when people underestimate you, they remove pressure. They stop watching, they stop expecting, they stop paying attention. And while they're distracted, you work, you grow. That is the key. The people who underestimate you often give you the greatest advantage, because they leave you alone, and being left alone is powerful, very powerful. It gives you space to develop, space to learn, space to improve, space to focus. Most people waste that opportunity. They become obsessed with changing opinions, obsessed with proving people wrong, obsessed with earning recognition, and because of that, they lose focus on what actually matters: progress. Remember this. Results don't care about opinions. Success doesn't care about opinions. Growth doesn't care about opinions. Only your ego cares, and your ego will happily destroy your future if you let it, because ego wants recognition now. Discipline wants results later. That is the battle every single day. Instant validation versus long-term growth. Immediate recognition versus lasting achievement. One feels better. The other creates a better life. You have a choice. Imagine two people. The first spends years talking about what they're going to accomplish, posting about it, explaining it, defending it, trying to convince everyone. The second stays quiet, works consistently, improves daily, builds patiently. Years later, the second person succeeds, not because they talked more, because they worked more. That is the key. The world rewards results, not explanations, not promises, not intentions. Results. And results require focus. Focus requires discipline. Discipline requires ignoring distractions, including the distraction of other people's opinions. The moment you stop trying to impress people, something amazing happens. Your energy returns. Your focus returns. Your clarity returns, because you are no longer performing. You are producing. You are no longer proving. You are building. That is a completely different mindset, a completely different life, a completely different future. Let them doubt you. Let them underestimate you. Let them misunderstand you. Let them laugh. Let them criticize. Let them think whatever they want. Their opinions are not your responsibility. Your responsibility is your growth, your discipline, your mission. That is it. The people who win are rarely the loudest. They're rarely the most defensive. They're rarely the most concerned with appearances. They're usually the most focused, the most disciplined, the most committed, because they understand something powerful. The best revenge is not proving people wrong. The best revenge is building a life so meaningful that you no longer care what they think. Remember that. Stop proving, start building, start proving, start producing, stop seeking recognition, start seeking growth. Because the moment you stop trying to impress the world, you finally gain the freedom to improve yourself. You have learned to ignore doubt. Now, it is time to learn how to protect your focus from the endless distractions surrounding you. Chapter 7. Ignore the noise. Protect the mission. Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they're distracted by opinions, distracted by drama, distracted by trends, distracted by criticism, distracted by things that have absolutely nothing to do with their goals. That is the key. The modern world is not suffering from a lack of opportunity. It is suffering from a lack of focus. Every day, millions of people wake up with good intentions. They have goals. They have plans. They have dreams. They have dreams. They know what they should be doing. And yet, by the end of the day, almost nothing important gets done. Why? Because noise stole their attention. Remember that wherever attention goes, life follows. The world is full of noise, endless notifications, endless opinions, endless arguments, endless distractions, endless drama, and every single one of them is competing for one thing: your attention, because attention is valuable, very valuable. Companies want it, social media wants it, news outlets want it, critics want it, toxic people want it. Everyone wants your attention, because attention is power. The question is simple: who are you giving yours to? That is the key. Every day you are making investments, not only with money, with attention, and every investment creates a return. If you invest attention in negativity, if you invest attention in drama, you get drama. If you invest attention in fear, you get fear. If you invest attention in growth, you get growth. Life is constantly multiplying whatever receives your focus. That is why protecting your attention is one of the most important skills you'll ever learn. Most people don't understand this. They treat attention like it is unlimited. It is finite. Every hour spent consuming nonsense is an hour not spent improving. Every hour spent arguing is an hour not spent building. Every hour spent worrying is an hour not spent progressing. You have a choice. You can spend your attention, or you can invest it. Most people spend it. Winners invest it. That is the difference. Think about a magnifying glass. When sunlight is scattered, nothing happens. But when sunlight becomes focused, it becomes powerful enough to create fire. Human attention works the same way. Scattered attention creates weak results. Focused attention creates extraordinary results. That is the key. Success is often less about talent and more about concentration. The ability to focus longer than other people. The ability to stay committed longer than other people. The ability to ignore distractions longer than other people. That is why protecting your mission matters, because if you don't define your priorities, the world will define them for you. And the world is very good at keeping people distracted. Very good. There is always another controversy, another argument, another piece of gossip, another trend, another distraction. And if you are not careful, your entire life becomes a reaction to whatever appears in front of you. Instead of moving toward your goals, you simply drift. That is dangerous, because drifting feels productive. You are busy, you are occupied, you are doing things. But you are not moving forward, and motion is not progress. Remember that. Motion is not progress. Being busy does not mean being effective. A lot of people spend their lives climbing ladders, only to realize the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. That is what distractions do. They consume your life while convincing you you are making progress. That is the trap. The mission must always come first. Your mission, your goals, your growth, your future, not everyone else's priorities. Yours. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You need clarity, because clarity creates focus, and focus creates results. The people who achieve remarkable things are not superhuman. They simply become obsessed with what matters. They stop giving equal attention to everything, because everything is not equally important. That is the key. Some things deserve attention. Most things don't. The disciplined person understands this. The undisciplined person reacts to everything. Every headline, every comment, every distraction, every notification, every opinion. And because they react to everything, they accomplish very little. You have a choice. You can be available to everyone, or committed to your mission. You can be distracted, or focused. You can chase every opportunity, or dedicate yourself to one meaningful direction. One path creates confusion. The other creates momentum. Think about elite athletes. Think about successful entrepreneurs. Think about high performers in any field. Do you think they wake up every day asking, What distraction should I follow today? Number, they protect their focus aggressively because they understand something important. Every yes is also a no. Every time you say yes to distraction, you say no to progress. Every time you say yes to drama, you say no to growth. Every time you say yes to noise, you say no to your mission. That is the key. Protecting your mission means learning to say no. No to unnecessary conversations. No to pointless arguments. No to constant negativity. No to distractions disguised as opportunities. No to anything that steals energy without creating value. This requires discipline, not motivation. Discipline, because motivation comes and goes. Discipline remains. It is not about excitement. It is about discipline. It is not about inspiration. It is about discipline. It is not about talent. It is about discipline. The disciplined person stays focused when excitement disappears. The disciplined person keeps moving when progress feels slow. The disciplined person remembers the mission. And because they remember the mission, they continue moving forward while others become distracted. Remember this. The noise will never stop. The distractions will never disappear. The opinions will never end. The criticism will always exist. The drama will always be available. Your job is not to eliminate the noise. Your job is to ignore it. That is where power lies, not in controlling the world, in controlling your attention. Protect your mission. Protect your focus. Protect your future. Because the people who achieve extraordinary results are not the people with the fewest distractions. They are the people with the strongest commitment. And commitment means continuing forward regardless of the noise. You have learned how to protect your mission. Now, it is time to learn what to do when people actively try to attack, provoke, and distract you from that mission. Chapter 8. When people attack you. Wisconsin end differently at some point in your life. Someone will attack you, not physically, emotionally, psychologically. They will criticize you. They will doubt you. They will disrespect you. They will try to provoke you. And in that moment, you'll face a choice. A very important choice. Will you react, or will you rise above it? That is the key. Most people think winning means fighting back. It doesn't. Most people think winning means getting revenge. It doesn't. Most people think winning means proving the other person wrong. It doesn't. Real winning is different. Real winning is refusing to let someone else's behavior control your future. Think about how many people spend years trapped by one person's actions, one insult, one betrayal, one rejection, one criticism, one moment. And yet they carry it for years. The attack lasted minutes. The reaction lasted decades. That is the tragedy. The original attack wasn't what damaged them. Their attachment to it did. You can carry the attack, or you can carry the lesson. Not both. That is the key. Strong people extract the lesson. Weak people carry the wound. The strong person asks, "What can I learn from this?" The weak person asks, "How can I make them suffer?" One question creates growth, the other creates bitterness. And bitterness is expensive. Bitterness steals focus. Bitterness steals energy. Bitterness steals peace. Bitterness steals years of your life. The person who hurt you may move on within days. Meanwhile, you are still replaying the event years later. Think about that. Who is suffering more? The person who moved on, or the person still carrying the burden? That is why revenge is often a trap, because revenge keeps your attention connected to the very thing you are trying to escape. That is the key. Whatever controls your attention controls part of your life. That is why the greatest victory is often detachment, not retaliation. Detachment, the ability to move forward without carrying emotional baggage, the ability to continue building despite criticism, the ability to keep growing despite rejection, the ability to stay focused despite attacks. That is real power. Most people never develop it, because reacting feels satisfying. For a moment, it feels good to argue. It feels good to defend yourself. It feels good to imagine proving someone wrong. But temporary satisfaction often creates long-term problems. That is the pattern. You feel better for 10 minutes, then worse for 10 days. You win the argument, but lose your peace. You get the last word, but lose your focus. You prove a point, but delay your progress. Was it worth it? Usually not. That is why discipline matters. It is not about emotion, it is about discipline. Remember that. It is not about emotion, it is about discipline. The disciplined person understands that every conflict comes with a hidden question. The question is, where will you invest your energy? That is the real issue, not the criticism, not the attack, not the insult. The real issue is where your energy goes afterward, because energy determines action. Action determines results. Results determine your future. That is why protecting your energy is essential. Let's talk about criticism. Many people fear criticism, but criticism isn't always the enemy. Sometimes criticism reveals weaknesses. Sometimes criticism reveals blind spots. Sometimes criticism helps you improve. The problem isn't criticism. The problem is emotional attachment. That is the key. Take the lesson. Leave the emotion. Take the information. Leave the bitterness. Take the growth opportunity. Leave the resentment. Strong people do this constantly. They separate emotion from information. Weak people combine them. And because they combine them, they miss valuable lessons. Imagine someone criticizes your work. One person becomes defensive, argues, explains, obsesses over the criticism. Another person examines the criticism, keeps what is useful, ignores what isn't, then continues improving. Who wins? The answer is obvious. The second person, every time. Because growth beats ego. That is the key. Growth beats ego. The need to protect your ego often prevents your growth. The need to be right often prevents improvement. The need to win every argument often causes you to lose the bigger game. Remember that. The bigger game matters more. Your future matters more. Your mission matters more. Your peace matters more. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You need discipline. You need emotional control, because emotional control changes everything. Imagine a person who cannot be provoked, cannot be manipulated, cannot be distracted, cannot be emotionally controlled. How powerful would that person become? Very powerful, because most people are controlled by circumstances. The disciplined person is controlled by principles. That is the difference. One reacts, the other chooses. One follows emotion, the other follows purpose. One becomes distracted, the other stays focused, and focus wins. Every single time. Here is another truth. Some people attack you because they are struggling themselves. Some people criticize because they feel insecure. Some people try to pull others down because they haven't learned how to lift themselves up. Understanding this doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it helps create perspective. Perspective creates calm. Calm creates control. Control creates freedom. That is the key. The moment you stop taking every attack personally, you become stronger. Much stronger, because now you are no longer reacting from emotion. You are responding from wisdom. And wisdom is difficult to manipulate. Very difficult. Remember this. You don't have to attend every fight you are invited to. You don't have to answer every insult. You don't have to respond to every criticism. You don't have to win every battle. You only need to win the war. And the war is your future. The war is your mission. The war is becoming the person you are capable of becoming. Everything else is a distraction. So when people attack you, win differently. Win through growth. Win through discipline. Win through progress. Win through focus. Win through emotional control. Because the strongest response is often success. Not revenge, success. The strongest response is often peace, not anger, peace. The strongest response is often forward movement, not retaliation. Forward movement. You have learned how to deal with attacks. Now, It is time to master the next level of emotional strength. The ability to become completely unbothered by the things that once controlled you. Chapter 9. Become impossible to disturb. There is a level of strength most people never reach. A level where criticism no longer controls you. A level where rejection no longer defines you. A level where setbacks no longer break you. A level where other people's opinions no longer determine your emotional state. That level is called emotional independence. And once you develop it, your life changes forever. Most people live at the mercy of circumstances. If something good happens, they're happy. If something bad happens, they're miserable. If people praise them, they're confident. If people criticize them, they're insecure. Their emotions constantly rise and fall, depending on what happens around them. That is exhausting. And more importantly, it is dangerous. Because anything that controls your emotions controls your life. That is the key. If someone can ruin your entire day with a single comment, they have power over you. If someone can steal your peace with a single opinion, they have power over you. If someone can distract you from your goals with a single criticism, they have power over you. Most people don't realize how much power they've handed away. They hand it away every day, to strangers, to co-workers, to family members, to social media, to critics, to people who may not even know they exist. That is the tragedy. Imagine carrying a remote control. Now imagine giving that remote to everyone you meet. One person presses a button. You are angry. Another presses a button. You are sad. Another presses a button. You are anxious. Another presses a button. You are insecure. That is how most people live. Their emotional remote control is in someone else's hands. You have a choice. You can continue living this way, or you can take the remote back. That is the key. Taking the remote back means taking responsibility for your emotional state. Not blaming other people, not blaming circumstances, not blaming criticism. Because responsibility creates freedom. The moment you realize your reactions belong to you, everything changes. Now, let's be clear. Being unbothered does not mean feeling nothing. It does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming emotionally disciplined. That is different. Strong people feel emotions. They feel disappointment. They feel frustration. They feel sadness. They feel anger. The difference is, they don't become controlled by those emotions. They experience them. Then they move forward. Most people experience emotions and build a home there. That is the problem. One failure becomes a life story. One rejection becomes a lifelong insecurity. One criticism becomes years of self-doubt. That is not emotional intelligence. That is emotional attachment. That is the key. You must learn to feel emotions without becoming trapped inside them. Think about the weather. Some days are sunny. Some days are stormy. Some days are calm. Some days are difficult. You don't become the weather, you experience it. Emotions work the same way. They pass through. They come. They go. The problem begins when you build your identity around temporary feelings. You feel fear and decide you are weak. You feel anxiety and decide you are incapable. You feel rejection and decide you are unworthy. None of those conclusions are true. They're temporary emotions, not permanent realities. Remember that. Temporary emotions, not permanent realities. The disciplined person understands this. They don't trust every feeling. They don't obey every emotion. They don't react to every impulse. They pause. They observe. They choose. That is the key. Pause. Observe, choose. 3 simple words. 3 powerful habits. A weak mind reacts immediately. A strong mind creates space. Space between stimulus and response. Space between emotion and action. Space between frustration and decision. And inside that space lies power. Most people never develop that space. They live automatically. Something happens, they react. Something happens, they react. Something happens, they react. They react. Their entire life becomes a chain of unconscious responses. The disciplined person breaks the chain. That is why they seem calm. That is why they seem confident. That is why they seem unshakable. Not because life is easier for them. Because they learned how to respond differently. You have a choice. Every challenge gives you one. Every criticism, every disappointment, every difficult situation, you can react automatically, or you can respond intentionally. One creates weakness, the other creates strength. The more often you choose intentional responses, the stronger you become. Not overnight, gradually, day by day, moment by moment, choice by choice. That is how emotional resilience is built. Most people think resilience is something you are born with. It is not. Resilience is trained. Just like a muscle, every time you refuse to overreact, you become stronger. Every time you refuse to take something personally, you become stronger. Every time you stay focused, despite distractions, you become stronger. That is the key. Strength is built through repetition, not inspiration. Repetition. This is why emotionally strong people appear different. Because they are different. They don't panic as easily. They don't complain as often. They don't become overwhelmed as quickly. Not because they have fewer problems. Habits of discipline, habits of perspective, habits of self-control. And those habits create freedom. The ultimate goal is not to eliminate problems. The ultimate goal is to become bigger than the problems. Think about that. Most people spend their lives trying to create a world without discomfort, a world without criticism, a world without setbacks, a world without difficult people. That world does not exist. The stronger strategy is different. Become so emotionally strong that those things no longer control you. That is the key. The goal isn't a perfect life. The goal is a stronger mind. Because a stronger mind can handle an imperfect life. And life will always be imperfect. There will always be criticism. There will always be obstacles. There will always be uncertainty. But there doesn't have to be suffering, not unnecessary suffering, not self-created suffering, not suffering caused by emotional overreaction. Remember this, you don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You need discipline. You need perspective. You need emotional control. Because the moment you stop allowing outside events to control your inner state, you become free, and freedom is power, real power. The kind of power that cannot be taken away by opinions, cannot be taken away by criticism, cannot be taken away by rejection, cannot be taken away by circumstances. You become impossible to disturb, impossible to manipulate, impossible to control, and that is when life begins to change. You have learned how to become emotionally unshakable. Now, it is time to bring everything together to discover how the person who stops reacting ultimately starts winning. Chapter 9. Become impossible to disturb. There is a level of strength most people never reach. A level where criticism no longer controls you. A level where rejection no longer defines you. A level where setbacks no longer break you. A level where other people's opinions no longer determine your emotional state. That level is called emotional independence. And once you develop it, your life changes forever. Most people live at the mercy of circumstances. If something good happens, they're happy. If something bad happens, they're miserable. If people praise them, they're confident. If people criticize them, they're insecure. Their emotions constantly rise and fall, depending on what happens around them. That is exhausting. And more importantly, it is dangerous. Because anything that controls your emotions controls your life. That is the key. If someone can ruin your entire day with a single comment, they have power over you. If someone can steal your peace with a single opinion, they have power over you. If someone can distract you from your goals with a single criticism, they have power over you. Most people don't realize how much power they've handed away. They hand it away every day, to strangers, to co-workers, to family members, to social media, to critics, to people who may not even know they exist. That is the tragedy. Imagine carrying a remote control. Now imagine giving that remote to everyone you meet. One person presses a button. You are angry. Another presses a button. You are sad. Another presses a button. You are anxious. Another presses a button. You are insecure. That is how most people live. Their emotional remote control is in someone else's hands. You have a choice. You can continue living this way, or you can take the remote back. That is the key. Taking the remote back means taking responsibility for your emotional state. Not blaming other people, not blaming circumstances, not blaming criticism. Because responsibility creates freedom. The moment you realize your reactions belong to you, everything changes. Now, let's be clear. Being unbothered does not mean feeling nothing. It does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming emotionally disciplined. That is different. Strong people feel emotions. They feel disappointment. They feel frustration. They feel sadness. They feel anger. The difference is, they don't become controlled by those emotions. They experience them. Then they move forward. Most people experience emotions and build a home there. That is the problem. One failure becomes a life story. One rejection becomes a lifelong insecurity. One criticism becomes years of self-doubt. That is not emotional intelligence. That is emotional attachment. That is the key. You must learn to feel emotions without becoming trapped inside them. Think about the weather. Some days are sunny. Some days are stormy. Some days are calm. Some days are difficult. You don't become the weather, you experience it. Emotions work the same way. They pass through. They come. They go. The problem begins when you build your identity around temporary feelings. You feel fear and decide you are weak. You feel anxiety and decide you are incapable. You feel rejection and decide you are unworthy. None of those conclusions are true. They're temporary emotions, not permanent realities. Remember that. Temporary emotions, not permanent realities. The disciplined person understands this. They don't trust every feeling. They don't obey every emotion. They don't react to every impulse. They pause. They observe. They choose. That is the key. Pause. Observe, choose. 3 simple words. 3 powerful habits. A weak mind reacts immediately. A strong mind creates space. Space between stimulus and response. Space between emotion and action. Space between frustration and decision. And inside that space lies power. Most people never develop that space. They live automatically. Something happens, they react. Something happens, they react. Something happens, they react. They react. Their entire life becomes a chain of unconscious responses. The disciplined person breaks the chain. That is why they seem calm. That is why they seem confident. That is why they seem unshakable. Not because life is easier for them. Because they learned how to respond differently. You have a choice. Every challenge gives you one. Every criticism, every disappointment, every difficult situation, you can react automatically, or you can respond intentionally. One creates weakness, the other creates strength. The more often you choose intentional responses, the stronger you become. Not overnight, gradually, day by day, moment by moment, choice by choice. That is how emotional resilience is built. Most people think resilience is something you are born with. It is not. Resilience is trained. Just like a muscle. Every time you refuse to overreact, you become stronger. Every time you refuse to take something personally, you become stronger. Every time you stay focused, despite distractions, you become stronger. That is the key. Strength is built through repetition, not inspiration. Repetition. This is why emotionally strong people appear different. Because they are different. They don't panic as easily. They don't complain as often. They don't become overwhelmed as quickly. Not because they have fewer problems. Habits of discipline, habits of perspective, habits of self-control. And those habits create freedom. The ultimate goal is not to eliminate problems. The ultimate goal is to become bigger than the problems. Think about that. Most people spend their lives trying to create a world without discomfort. A world without criticism. A world without setbacks. A world without difficult people. That world does not exist. The stronger strategy is different. Become so emotionally strong that those things no longer control you. That is the key. The goal isn't a perfect life. The goal is a stronger mind. Because a stronger mind can handle an imperfect life. And life will always be imperfect. There will always be criticism. There will always be obstacles. There will always be uncertainty. But there doesn't have to be suffering, not unnecessary suffering. Not self-created suffering. Not suffering caused by emotional overreaction. Remember this, you don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You need discipline. You need perspective. You need emotional control. Because the moment you stop allowing outside events to control your inner state, you become free, and freedom is power, real power. The kind of power that cannot be taken away by opinions, cannot be taken away by criticism, cannot be taken away by rejection, cannot be taken away by circumstances. You become impossible to disturb, impossible to manipulate, impossible to control, and that is when life begins to change. You have learned how to become emotionally unshakable. Now it is time to bring everything together to discover how the person who stops reacting ultimately starts winning. Chapter 10. The day you stop reacting. You start winning. Everything you've learned in this audiobook comes down to one simple truth. Your life changes the moment you stop reacting. Not because the world changes, not because people change, not because circumstances suddenly become easier. Your life changes because you change. That is the key. Most people spend their lives reacting to criticism, reacting to rejection, reacting to bad news, reacting to negativity, reacting to opinions, reacting to people who have no real impact on their future, and every reaction pulls them away from their mission. A little more focus lost, a little more energy wasted, a little more time gone forever. Until one day they look back and realize something painful. They spent years fighting battles that never mattered. Years. Think about that. Years of worrying about what people thought. Years of seeking validation. Years of proving themselves. Years of replaying arguments. Years of carrying resentment. Years of reacting. And what did it produce? Very little. Because reactions rarely build anything. They only consume. That is the key. Reactions consume. Discipline creates. Remember that. Reactions consume. Discipline creates. One destroys progress. The other creates it. One keeps you stuck in the past. The other moves you toward the future. One weakens your focus. The other strengthens it. That is why winning begins the moment reacting ends. Not because you become perfect, because your energy finally has a direction. Imagine a river. When water flows in every direction, it loses force. But when that same water is focused, it becomes powerful enough to shape landscapes. Human potential works the same way. Most people leak energy everywhere. To critics, to drama, to social media, to arguments, to people who don't matter. Their energy is scattered, and scattered energy creates scattered results. That is why they feel exhausted. That is why they feel frustrated. That is why they feel frustrated. Not because they lack potential, because they lack focus. And focus is impossible when you are reacting to everything. You have a choice. You can continue reacting, or you can start directing your energy toward what matters. That is the key. Direction matters more than intensity. Many people work hard. Few people work in the right direction. Many people stay busy. Few people stay focused. Many people react. Few people build. And builders always outperform reactors. Always. Think about where you want to be 5 years from now. What kind of person do you want to become? What kind of life do you want to create? Now, ask yourself a difficult question. Will reacting to criticism help you get there? Will arguing online help you get there? Will obsessing over people's opinions help you get there? Will seeking validation help you get there? The answer is obvious. Number those things only delay progress. That is why winners become selective. Selective with attention. Selective with energy. Selective with emotions. Selective with emotions. Selective with time. Because they understand something most people ignore. Everything comes at a cost. Every reaction has a cost. Every distraction has a cost. Every unnecessary argument has a cost. Every moment spent focused on negativity has a cost. The cost is your future. That is the key. You are always paying. The only question is what you are paying for. Are you paying for growth? Or are you paying for distractions? Are you paying for discipline? Or are you paying for drama? Are you paying for other people's opinions? Choose carefully, Because your choices compound. Day after day, month after month, year after year. A small reaction today may seem harmless, but repeated over thousands of days, it becomes a lifestyle. And lifestyles create destinies. The same is true for discipline. A small act of self-control today may seem insignificant, but repeated over thousands of days, it transforms your entire life. That is how winning happens. Not in one dramatic moment, not overnight, not through luck. Through daily discipline, daily focus, daily choices. That is the key. Winning is not an event. Winning is a habit. Most people misunderstand success. They think success is a destination, a finish line, a final achievement. It isn't. Success is the result of repeated behaviors, repeated thoughts, repeated decisions, repeated discipline. The person who wins is usually not the most talented. They're not always the smartest. They're not always the luckiest. They're often the person who stayed focused the longest, the person who protected their attention, the person who ignored distractions, the person who refused to react. That is why emotional control is such a competitive advantage. Because most people don't have it. Most people are controlled by circumstances. Controlled by emotions. Controlled by other people's opinions. Controlled by temporary feelings. The disciplined person is different. They operate from purpose, not emotion, from principles, not impulses, from vision, not distractions. That is the difference. And that difference changes everything. Remember everything you've learned. You stopped giving people free rent in your head. You learned that every reaction has a cost. You stopped explaining yourself to everyone. You stopped seeking validation. You learned the power of silence. You learned to let people underestimate you. You learned to ignore the noise. You learned to respond differently when people attacked you. You learned to become impossible to disturb. And now you understand the final lesson. Winning is not about defeating other people. Winning is about mastering yourself. That is the key. The greatest victory is self-mastery. Because once you master yourself, very little in the outside world can defeat you. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You don't need their validation. You need discipline. You need focus. You need consistency. You need the courage to keep moving forward when others become distracted. That is what creates extraordinary lives. Not talent, not luck, not perfect circumstances. Discipline. Remember that discipline. The world will always offer distractions. People will always have opinions. Critics will always exist. Drama will always be available. The question is simple. Will you react, or will you remain focused? Will you chase approval, or will you chase growth? Will you protect your peace, or will you give it away? You have a choice. Every day, every hour, every moment. And those choices will determine your future. The day you stop reacting is the day you stop being controlled. The day you stop being controlled is the day you reclaim your power. And the day you reclaim your power is the day you truly begin to win. Not occasionally, not temporarily, consistently, quietly. Because the people who win the most in life are rarely the loudest. They are the most disciplined, the most focused, the most intentional, the most committed. And now it is your turn. Stop reacting. Start building. Stop explaining. Start growing. Stop seeking approval. Start creating results. Protect your attention. Protect your peace. Protect your future. And never forget, the moment you stop reacting to everything, you finally become capable of achieving anything. Look at how much of your life has changed already. Not because the world changed, not because people changed. Because you changed. You stopped reacting. You stopped explaining. You stopped chasing approval. You stopped giving your attention to people who never deserved it. And in doing so, you took your power back. Remember this, your attention is your life. Your future follows. Every time you ignore unnecessary drama, you get stronger. Every time you refuse to react, you get freer. Every time you focus on your mission instead of your critics, you move closer to the life you want. From this day forward, let people misunderstand you, let people doubt you, let people criticize you. Keep building, keep growing, keep moving. Because the people who win in life are not the people who react to everything. They are the people who stay focused long enough to become unstoppable. Now, close your eyes, take one deep breath, and make a decision starting today. Never react, just ignore and keep winning.